Should recycling be mandatory in every household? Recycling has emerged as a crucial practice in the global effort to combat environmental degradation and promote sustainability. As the world grapples with the consequences of climate change, pollution, and resource depletion, the importance of recycling cannot be overstated. However, the question remains, should recycling be mandatory in every household? This article explores the various dimensions of this debate, examining the environmental benefits, economic implications, social responsibilities, and challenges associated with making recycling a compulsory practice. Understanding recycling and its importance. Recycling involves the process of converting waste materials into reusable materials, thereby reducing the need for new resources and minimizing waste. The primary materials commonly recycled include paper, glass, metal, and plastics. Recycling offers several benefits, including conservation of resources. Recycling reduces the demand for raw materials, preserving natural resources such as timber, water, and minerals. Energy savings. The recycling process typically consumes less energy compared to producing new products from virgin materials. For instance, recycling aluminum saves up to 95% of the energy required to create new aluminum from bauxite, or reduction of landfill waste. By recycling, we divert a significant amount of waste from landfills, which helps mitigate issues such as soil and groundwater contamination and greenhouse gas emissions. Economic benefits. The recycling industry generates jobs and contributes to the economy. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the recycling sector employs millions of people and adds substantial value to the economy. Given these benefits, one could argue that making recycling mandatory in every household is a logical step toward fostering a more sustainable future. The case for mandatory recycling. Environmental necessity. The environmental necessity for mandatory recycling is compelling. With landfills reaching capacity and the planet facing unprecedented climate challenges, the need for responsible waste management practices has never been greater. Mandatory recycling can significantly reduce the volume of waste generated and foster a culture of sustainability. Behavioral change. Making recycling mandatory can lead to changes in public behavior. When recycling becomes a legal obligation, people are more likely to adopt eco-friendly practices. This shift can create a ripple effect, encouraging individuals to become more conscious of their consumption habits, leading to reduced waste generation and increased resource conservation. Equity and access. Mandatory recycling can address issues of equity and access. In many communities, access to recycling facilities and services is limited, particularly in lower-income neighborhoods. By making recycling a requirement, governments can invest in infrastructure that ensures all households have the means to recycle, thus promoting environmental justice. Global standards. Enacting mandatory recycling can help establish global environmental standards. As countries work together to combat climate change and promote sustainable practices, having a baseline standard for recycling can facilitate international cooperation and accountability. Economic considerations. While the environmental benefits of mandatory recycling are clear, the economic implications warrant careful examination. Implementing a mandatory recycling program involves costs, including infrastructure investment, governments may need to invest in recycling facilities, collection systems, and educational programs to support compliance enforcement. Ensuring that households adhere to recycling mandates may require additional resources for monitoring and enforcement, including fines for non-compliance. Public education. A successful recycling program necessitates public education to inform citizens about which materials can be recycled and how to do so effectively. This effort requires funding and ongoing outreach. However, these costs must be weighed against the long-term savings and benefits of recycling. For instance, reducing landfill use can lower waste management costs over time, and the creation of jobs in the recycling sector can stimulate local economies, social responsibility, and community engagement. Fostering a collective responsibility. Mandatory recycling reinforces the idea of collective responsibility toward the environment. When recycling becomes a societal norm, individuals feel a shared obligation to protect their communities and the planet. This sense of responsibility can foster stronger community ties, as residents come together to engage in environmental initiatives and support local sustainability efforts. Educational opportunities. Making recycling mandatory can also create educational opportunities for households. Schools and community organizations can develop programs that teach children and adults about the importance of recycling, waste reduction, and sustainable living. By integrating these principles into everyday life, future generations will be better equipped to tackle environmental challenges. Cultural shifts. Over time, mandatory recycling can contribute to cultural shifts that prioritize sustainability and environmental stewardship. As recycling becomes ingrained in daily routines, it can lead to broader discussions about sustainability, prompting individuals to consider their consumption habits and advocate for eco-friendly policies. Challenges and concerns. Despite the compelling arguments in favor of mandatory recycling, several challenges and concerns must be addressed. Resistance to change. One of the primary challenges of implementing mandatory recycling is resistance to change. Individuals may be reluctant to alter their habits, especially if they perceive recycling as inconvenient or burdensome. Education and outreach efforts will be crucial in overcoming this resistance, emphasizing the importance of recycling and providing practical solutions to make it easier for households. Contamination issues. Recycling contamination is a significant concern, as improperly sorted materials can render entire batches of recyclables unusable. Mandatory recycling programs must include clear guidelines to minimize contamination and ensure that materials are properly prepared for recycling. This may require additional education and resources to help households understand proper recycling practices. Economic disparities. While mandatory recycling aims to promote equity, it can also exacerbate economic disparities if not implemented thoughtfully. Low-income households may face challenges such as lack of access to recycling facilities or the means to transport recyclables. Policymakers must ensure that mandatory recycling programs include provisions for equity, such as providing accessible collection services or resources for underserved communities. Conclusion. In conclusion, making recycling mandatory in every household presents a viable solution to the pressing environmental challenges we face today. The environmental benefits, potential for behavior change, and promotion of social responsibility make a strong case for this initiative. While there are significant economic considerations and challenges to overcome, the long-term advantages of mandatory recycling, such as resource conservation, waste reduction, and job creation, far outweigh the drawbacks. Ultimately, the success of mandatory recycling will depend on a collaborative effort involving governments, communities, and individuals. By working together to create a culture of sustainability and environmental stewardship, we can forge a path toward a healthier planet for future generations. Recycling is not just an individual obligation, it is a collective responsibility that can lead to meaningful change in our communities and beyond.